Hey everyone, I'm Chris Lesniak,
And I'm Rob Byer, and this is
the Debate Math Podcast. When teachers get their certification in a state, it's usually for a specific subject and a grade band.
for instance, I got my certification in K-6 elementary first, and then I added on 6 to 9 social studies and 7 to 12 math, where Chris was certified in math for grades 7 through 12.
So some grade bands are narrow and some are wide, and it can vary from state to state or year to year.
And we wanted to explore this choice in more detail with our latest debate resolution. Should we narrow the grade bands?
So here, arguing that we should have narrow grade bands, we have an educator who travels across the nation and world to learn about teaching mathematics with teachers through the process of lesson study. He's a skydiving, scuba diving, bungee jumping, snowboarding professor of mathematics education with over 75 peer-reviewed research publications on the teaching and learning of mathematics. He has been an invited keynote speaker to mathematics education meetings around the world, including Australia, Chile, China, Japan, and Thailand. Ooh. He's also a former Teacher of the Year of the Oklahoma City Public Schools and the University of Arkansas in Fort Smith. It's Dr. Gabriel Matney. Hi, Gabriel.
Hey, Chris.
Glad to
Hey,
have
Rob.
you. Glad to have you here. Can you tell our listeners where you are and what your current role is?
Absolutely. I'm currently located in my home in Bowling Green, Ohio, and I am a professor of mathematics education at Bowling Green State University in Ohio.
Wonderful. And then the question we ask all of our guests is when did math first become controversial to you?
Well, I think that was second grade. It became controversial to me personally. I was called in with my mother for a special session regarding my inability to subtract. And at the time, I could remember as a kid thinking, um, you know, I'm not quite sure why we're here, right? But I listened to my teacher talk to my mom about my difficulties with subtraction, and then my mom started helping me at home with some things. And as I grew up and reflected, I recognized, oh, I have some. Sorry, so I'm growing up as a young boy. I have some problems with mathematics. There's some things that are difficult for me, evidently. So yeah, so that was the first time I felt like uh, math was something turbulent in my life.
Now, arguing that grade bands should not be so narrow, we have a math specialist and national board certified teacher with a doctorate in math ed who worked as an instructional coach for K-5 math and literacy and a PD coordinator for math and science. She has served as the president of the Ohio Council of Teachers of Mathematics, OCTM, a curriculum co designer, and is an instructor for assessment and math methods courses at the Ohio State University. She has published in various journals and presented at multiple state and national conferences. She strives to lift the voices of all learners by providing experiences that will engage and empower them. It's Dr. Jody Bailey. Hi, Jody.
Hi, glad to be here.
Can you remind our listeners where you are and what your current role is?
Yes, I am currently a math specialist with Hilliard City Schools, where I work with seventh and eighth graders. And I am currently in my home in Dublin, Ohio.
Well, welcome back. And when did math first become controversial to you? You could say the one you said before. If you had a new one, you could share that one as well.
Um, I actually don't remember the one I shared before, but the one that I the one that I often come back to is I don't know about controversial, but that there could be more than one correct answer. And I did not know that until my first year of teaching. When I assigned a page, I just thought kids should be doing some writing about their thinking. It was back during Ohio's proficiency test era. Um, and I started grading their papers, and kids had a different answer than the one I had gotten when I made my answer key. And they were students that it surprised me that they had the wrong answer. So I looked more carefully at their work, and they had interpreted the problem a little differently, and their answer was absolutely correct. So the idea that there could be more than one correct answer to a math problem was somewhat controversial for me and embarrassing when I had to scratch out my notes that they were not correct.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. And with that, let's get into the debate. We begin with opening statements from each of our speakers. You each have 2 minutes to present your arguments, and we're starting with you, Gabriel, arguing that we should have narrow grade bands. You are up, Gabriel, and your time begins now.
Okay, so good teaching is complex and difficult to do because learning is actually complex and difficult to achieve. So that is why teaching is a profession. It's difficult. One cannot simply walk into a classroom on a day-to-day basis and significantly affect learning of children. It requires professional attributes, things that we attain from both knowledge and experience. It requires that we really think about who we are and who the students are and what we want them to learn. We're always in a relationship with something being learned. So for a teacher who is working to create a space where something, where a child can encounter the content of learning, it's critical for the teacher to know many things. Those things include how to create a learning ecology with students, how to motivate them, how to build rapport with them. And yes, a teacher needs to deeply understand the content and its connections that they're trying to bring the students into, that they're trying to engage the students in. Ensuring good teaching across the state is actually even more complex than just, what we do in a single classroom. Ohio has 110,000 teachers, for example. So as states wrestle with the issues of licensure and certification, it's a big task. 110,000 people in Ohio. So as such, our teachers deserve the best preparation and the best further PD that we can provide. To do so would mean recognizing that professional knowledge and dispositions take time and are critical to the success of our students. A PK8 grade band for certification is way too large. It deprofessionalizes teaching. It ignores mountains of research showing that this is a terrible idea for the preparation of teachers and the learning of their future students. On top of that, recent research by O'Mellon, which surveyed those wishing to become teachers across 26 different counties in Ohio, 26 different universities in Ohio, has shown that this will exacerbate the teacher shortage. As many as 23.4% of those who would be coming into education otherwise will choose to go into other professions. To support these claims, I will share research data based in 2 focal areas. The first focal area will be the psychology and human need of those seeking to enter the profession of teaching. The second focal area will be about the need for the development of early childhood and elementary teachers' dispositions and specialized content knowledge, specific to mathematics, but also the STEM fields more generally.
Thank you. And now we will hear from Jody, arguing that we should not narrow the grade bands. Jody, your time begins now.
All right, thank you. Well, it is my stance that a broader grade band offers actually more opportunities for a coherent educational experience. As many educators will attest, students in their classroom are not all working at identical skill levels. This is particularly true following the inconsistent learning that occurred during the pandemic and is particularly evident in a subject like mathematics, where topics and skills build upon one another. For example, I have colleagues who are trying to support middle school students, and they say they don't have the background knowledge with fractions or early numeracy concepts to help connect the material for their students. So by preparing teachers to spark curiosity and listen to students' ideas, we can create math classrooms where both teachers and students feel empowered by mathematics. This broader licensure band that prepares generalists allows teacher preparation programs to focus on supporting the whole child rather than a focus on specialization in a particular content area. Using my own journey as an example, I began my teacher education program with a goal to teach kindergarten because I loved children and books in that order. To me, math was a boring chore, and my coursework did little to change that mindset. When I was hired to teach fourth grade, I was asked to attend a math teacher leader meeting. This opportunity completely changed the trajectory of my career. I relearned mathematics by engaging my students in problem-solving tasks and listening to their strategies. This experience gave me a window into a different way of thinking about mathematics and prompted me to earn a doctorate in mathematics education. Wondering how a mathematical idea grows and blossoms across grade levels has been a motivation for my work, and I have seen the same spark of curiosity in others. A broad understanding of numeracy, along with an understanding of interdisciplinary connections, will equip teachers to serve all students in their classroom rather than a particular course or grade level. For example, while my current role supports students in grades 7 and 8, much of the content work we do begins with additive reasoning, as I work to move them towards multiplicative and proportional reasoning. As educators work to help students recover from the unfinished learning that resulted from the pandemic, we encounter students with a variety of skills and levels of understanding. Once a teacher knows the specific grade level or course they are teaching, as they work their way into their career, they can dig deeply into the curriculum and supporting resources to continue building their expertise with the mathematical content. In the methods courses I have taught over the years, I share with students that I cannot teach everything they need to know in one semester. My goal is that they leave my class with a sense of curiosity, a desire to make connections across different strategies for problem solving, and most importantly, listen carefully to student thinking. I have completely relearned mathematics by listening attentively to the thinking of children. Without the opportunity to teach different grade levels and content areas, I would not be where I am today. Is a narrower licensure band limiting teachers from reaching their full potential?
Wow. Thank you both for your opening statements. Already my wheels are turning. I know I can normally tell when the wheels are turning in Chris's mind as well. The first thing that I'm thinking of, because I think this is where we should probably start, is for both of you. What's an acceptable grade band? Like if we're talking about certifications, what would be acceptable? So that way we can get maybe a baseline of where we stand. And Jody, I'll start with you.
Well, I would go broad. Like my certification is kindergarten through 8th grade. So
Would that
I
be
think it
acceptable?
gets I think it gets really tricky when you start, like fractions begin in 3rd grade. And so if you say like Ohio's is currently 4.9. So if you're 4.9 licensure in math, you miss all of those foundational fraction ideas in grade 3.
Gabriel?
Well, I think that I agree with Jody that it's tricky. At our university, you don't miss those because we have several courses in which students are learning specialized content knowledge. And so it may depend on where you're educated and what their program is focusing on. Obviously, the things that Jody has brought up, both in her opening statement and in this reply, are exactly right. That we need those who are teaching upper grades to understand connections in lower grades because those connections are important, and the likelihood of you having a student or multiple students that are going to need to start at a different spot, right, is high actually. So that's what we do in our preparation program. We go down and make sure that happens. As far as the licensure bands, whether they should be narrowed or broadened and what would be an acceptable level, another complication comes in with what all do we mean by one should be able to teach in a grade band, right? For example, according to current Ohio law, those who would be certified will no longer be able to be certified in grades 4 through 9 in 2 content areas. Rather, there will be 2 bands. One is pre-K to grade 8, everything. Everything. You have to know everything. You have to know all the connections for social studies, all the connections for science, all the connections for math, all the connections. And on top of that, you have to understand all the psychology of all the ages of students as they transpire across a gigantic age range at the point in human growth where those changes are significant and rapid, right? It's not like we're talking about 10 years of adulthood. We're talking about 10 years of childhood here, age 4 to 14. That's where I'm saying it's too broad. And I think our old licensure bands made more sense. Somebody could focus on pre-K to grade 5, right? And they could kind of generalize across all the subject areas because the band was smaller, right? Then you could take 4-9 and you could focus on 2 content areas. Content ramps up pretty heavily in those areas. So focus on 2, get to know 2, get to know the children of middle childhood, what their psychology is, who they are, what makes them tick, what motivates them, all those things. And then grade 7-12, you would focus on 1. So see those bandwidths, right, of 6 to 7 years makes sense when you're thinking about the amount of, you're trying to wager the content that we're teaching, right, and the demands of that versus all of the time frames and the changing of children that we're engaging in.
Yeah, I see. So a big part of it is because especially in the younger grades, how many subjects the teacher is responsible for. I'm just curious, kind of adding to Rob's question, if we're talking about just math, like if there was a math specific certification, Jody, would you still be with K8 as a good grade band? And Gabriel, would you want to have narrow, if it was a math specific kind of role or option, would you still want that, or would you be okay with K8 if it was like one subject only?
I actually would not be in favor of a single subject for something like K8. And I will say, I'm not sure about the pre-K. Like the old licensure was actually birth through grade 3, which was a lot. So kind of, I agree with your point, Gabriel, like teaching infants or 3-year-olds. I taught preschool. Like age 4, I feel like, yeah, they're starting to show some of those characteristics of students you would see in elementary school, but obviously an infant is something different. But I wouldn't be in favor of a single subject for something like K8. I think it's really important to focus on the whole child at that point in those developmental years. Content is important, but I think if you're working with students in sort of that K8 range, it's focusing on those needs of the whole child. If you look at Ohio's plan for the whole child, they mention a lot of aspects that are not related to academics and content specific. I think it's growing children, making them engaged learners. So I think it really is more of a focus, not necessarily on a specific content, but on how do you become a learner? What does that look like?
Okay.
You know, interestingly enough, I agree with Jody that that would be a consternation unless we think of not a one, like perhaps it's not the only way to focus on the whole child is like one adult. Maybe a team of adults is focusing on a whole child. We do this a lot in middle level. And when I taught high school in Oklahoma City, this is exactly our idea, right? The middle level team, but applied to the high school. It's just like we're all responsible for all the learning of every student. Even though in my math class, I'm engaging them in these quantitative concepts, right? And in history and language arts, they're engaging in those ideas. But we're all talking about this cohort of students that we have. So I think it can be done where we have some content expertise, but we're teaming with others to really think about the development of the whole child. And I worry that generalist notions don't give teachers, it deprofessionalizes because it doesn't give teachers the expertise that they really need to progress children in those ideas across. And then we would be graduating them without that expertise anyway. So I think, and research is bearing that, right? So I can share some of that later, but that's kind of I agree with Jody on the whole child. I don't necessarily think that there's only one way to actually nurture the development of a whole child.
So when you say that they need to be prepared, I guess, to teach the child, you are thinking specifically about content. No?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not. And like in my opening statement, I mentioned many things and content was last, but I said teachers have to be knowledgeable of how to create a learning ecology with students. They have to be knowledgeable about what motivates them, how to build rapport with them. We have to know the psychology of the child at various ages, and that changes drastically during this, especially this phase from age 4 or 5 all the way to 14, which is what PK8 does, right? Like that psychology changes drastically. Who they are as first graders are very different than fifth graders, is very different than eighth graders. And we have to understand that, right? And we have to know what that means for our teaching. And yes, also, so for me, it's a both and. Like there's these things that we have to understand about children and students, and there's these things we have to understand about content. But then there's this other kind of knowledge that was brought out into research a little more than 20 years ago, called specialized content knowledge. And that is the content knowledge teachers need exactly to bridge those two things, right? Knowledge of the child and knowledge of the subject. So, mostly when I talk tonight about content, I'm thinking about the content teachers need, and that's that specialized content knowledge, not the general knowledge like an engineer needs to know how to do these things, but rather things an engineer doesn't need to know, but a teacher has to know. They have to know how to bridge that content with uh, who the children are in that case. And who the children are in first grade is not the same, not even close to who they are in eighth grade. And to say to a teacher, oh, we could one in your first year of teaching, after you student taught and you did a lot of reading, right, in your first grade classroom, now we're going to hire you, and now I need you to teach eighth grade science. I don't know how we prepare someone for that with a first grade placement. And if I'm shoving you in eighth grade math, I don't know how I'm preparing you for an early childhood placement. It just creates all kinds of problems for me.
Could those placements change? Like I agree with the structure of placements that you're describing. That's tricky. So my placements were kindergarten and fifth grade for student teaching. But I also had several field experience placements for anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, like throughout my education, that were in a variety of settings. So I was in a second grade classroom for about a month. I was, and we, were sprinkled across urban, suburban, rural settings.
So I want to jump in real quick because this is something that's very real to my current position. Across many urban districts, partway into the year, they do something called leveling. And where, you have a first grade teacher that has been the first grade teacher all year up to that point. And then because of openings and, how long teachers have been there and things like that, so they'll get moved. And, recently like last year, we had a teacher who was in first grade that got moved to like seventh grade math. And if they have a pre-K 8 cert, I mean, technically they can do that. So I guess my question is more around, if we're thinking about content, is pre-K to 8, like if we do a pre-K to 8 cert, this is more for Jody first. If we do a pre-K to 8 cert, like what does the pre-service model look like? How does that have to change? And then in terms of like districts, and like a district, large districts, what does professional learning look like to try to make sure our teachers are prepared for that?
I think I really benefited from a strong foundation in inquiry-based learning. So I think as a teacher, I came in with a mindset that I still needed to continue learning. So I feel like a lot of the inquiry-based lessons that we did in science, actually, I would translate that to social studies. I would translate that to even some of the reading that we would do. I would integrate picture books into science and social studies lessons. I actually did not feel that my math coursework really prepared me. I had to do a lot of learning on my own for that. But I think what sparked my curiosity about that was this opportunity to be introduced once I had a job to problem solving tasks where kids listened or kids solved and shared their thinking. And I think I applied a lot of what I had learned in my generalist courses to the teaching of math.
And Gabriel, to you, we talk about more narrow. Are we talking about more narrow with like subject specific or content specific? Because again, I'm thinking, these past 2 years in the district that I'm in, we adopted a new K-8 math or a new K-8 ELA curriculum, and then the very next year adopted a K-8 math curriculum. So these teachers who are, self-contained have to understand not just the child, but the content also. So if you're looking at those grade band specifics, shrinking those and narrowing those, are you saying like we should go more content specific with that, or are you okay with keeping it as like a all cert, like it is in many states?
So I think the way we had it originally actually was research based and made the most sense. And that is kind of splitting the difference on your question, right? So it is there's another element that we're not kind of talking about here, and that's like, and this is another reason why I feel like the PK licensure is deprofessionalizing. And O'Mellan et al.'s research this year, 2024, in the state of Ohio shows this well. When people are wanting to enter the profession of teaching, they want professional choice. They enter with two things in mind, most generally. The first of those things is exactly what Jody's talking about. There's an age of children that I love. Now, that age may be adolescence. It may be high school. Like some people just like those. Maybe Chris was one of those since that was his certification, right? And maybe you were, of a different mindset, right? But a lot of times they come in, and if you really press them, they're like, I really want to teach something like pre-K to grade 2. Only they'll probably stay to grade. Like they're very specific, right? Or they'll say something like, I love upper elementary. Like they're just goofy and I just love that age 3, grade 3 through 5. Or they'll say, I really love 6-8. Middle school is my jam. Or they'll say, no, I really like high school 9 through 12. That, their prefrontal cortexes are more developed and I can reason with them better. And that's kind of who I am as a person. So I'd really like to teach that. And across those kind of 4 spectrums, then there's another thing that's probably going to come up. What do they want to teach? Like life skills or critical thinking or development of the whole child. Those kinds of things tend to be more elemented towards elementary grades, like PK2 or 3-5, more so than they do 6-8 or 9-12. And so I think it's a false dichotomy to say high school teachers don't care about students, they care about math. I don't think that's true. I think first and foremost, many of the ones I've met do care about that, but they also care about math. So it's a both and. I also think it's something that elementary teachers love as well. Now they may not bear a passion for a particular content in all cases, but there is content that they care about. Like, how do I help them learn to be a good human, right? How do I teach them life skills? How do I help them manage the rigors of school? Because what's coming for them at their early childhood ages is a whole system, right? That we're trying to help them understand, like maybe they're an only child. Okay, now you're around a lot of other people. We have to like learn to get along together, right? And all of that's having to happen in the early childhood ages. On top of, there are content standards that we need to teach, and it's a lot. So like having the time to become a professional in a particular age range with whatever content that you're teaching, whether that's a generalist content or specific content, is absolutely necessary for our profession.
So let me kind of building on that. I'm thinking a lot about, because Gabriel, you mentioned something about teacher retention in your opening statement, and I want to talk about like what's best for the teacher. So you're saying like teachers have in mind a specific band they want to teach in or a grade level they want to teach in, right? And I want to focus on that. But can I go to Jody first? Like, so why would a like wider grade band help make teachers' lives better in some way? Or like what thoughts do you have around that?
Well, one thing I was thinking about, Gabriel, while you were talking was I had the opportunity at the OCTM conference a couple of weeks ago to run into one of my former students from Otterbein, who I'd had 10 years ago. And she made a comment that now she's teaching, I can't remember now, it was either fourth or fifth grade math. So she thought she wanted to teach language arts. She thought she wanted to teach younger grades. 10 years later, she's teaching fourth or fifth grade math and loves it. I think about my own career path. I would never have wanted to just stay in I wouldn't want to be a second grade teacher for 30 years. I like having some variety, some alternate options. And I really believe that as I have wanted new changes and had the opportunity to learn new grade level curriculum, it has reinforced and strengthened my teaching skills. And I am able to say, oh, I work with kids who are really disengaged from math. They're 7th and 8th graders. And when I sit down with them, I tell them, I have never met a student who cannot do math. However, I have met a lot of students who what we teach in school doesn't really connect for them. And I tell them, I said, I feel really grateful I've had the opportunity to teach elementary school. I've taught 7th grade math and 8th grade math, so I know where you're going. And I feel like I'm in a perfect position to help you. But with a much narrower grade band licensure, I wouldn't be in that position to help them. I wouldn't have had those experiences.
Yeah, and so then Gabriel, like how do you see the narrow grade bands helping teachers? Because I work with a lot of teachers all across the country, and I hear a lot of them who are in a grade band but want to move at some point to different in a grade level, but want to move to different grade level at some point, or they took this job because there was an opening, right? And they're waiting for something to open up in a different grade level that they want to teach. So doesn't that give them more flexibility? Like how is what you're proposing helping with teacher retention?
The pathway that Jody took was sounds fantastic, and to hear Jody speak about the way she's engaging with students has always been inspirational to me. People may not know, but Jody and I are old friends. So so I love that. But the ability for professional choice to advance into a different licensure band is a different conversation than you have this long to give them a certification as a pre-service teacher. So whenever we're talking about the ability for a teacher to move up or into a different grade band, in the past, when we had a pre-K through grade 3, that was like 4 or 5 years ago, we had that. Then we made it PK5, right? And so what happened was when we had the PK3 degree, there were moves to say, look, there has to be a professional pathway for those who want to teach grades 4 and 5. My wife happens to be one of those who wanted to teach grades 4 and 5 after she has an early childhood degree. She always thought she wanted to teach kindergarten. Right now, by choice, she's teaching 5th grade math and absolutely loves it. This is not a different story than your Otterbein student, right? Mm-hmm. But Tammy, my wife, also recognizes a PK8 licensure for pre-service teachers is insane. How can we, right, actually prepare them? We cannot give them the level of experience that you gained for teaching elementary a year, then teaching a different grade for a year, then teaching another grade for a year, so that then when you're teaching these upper grades, everything clicks for you, it makes sense how you can connect those students back. That's just too long a range for someone to be prepared to do. Because it's not even just about the content of math. We're literally saying you're going to have to learn all of how to do that with social studies. You have a 15-hour reading core. You have state mandated courses that make you well-rounded that all universities have to do. It's not like we can just say, look, what you need are 5 classes on really how to teach all of these elements of cardinality and number and unitizing that leads us into fraction knowledge, and fraction knowledge leads us into proportional reasoning knowledge, and all across that spectrum, all the way, we're also talking about geometry, we're also talking about data analysis, we're also talking about algebra. All of that's in there. All of it has to be well understood by the teacher. It has to be well connected by the teacher. And now I'm up to 6th grade only, right? And I'm not even getting into 7th and 8th grade content, which is going to, the 8th grade content is going to take us all the way to linear functions. And that's just math. And I haven't even yet talked about how math works with different ages of students, much less social studies, science, reading, language arts, all the other things that are going to be weighed upon them to do that. So to say that broad licensure band is going to work out, the research isn't there to support that. Now, pathways for teachers after they get like a certain expertise in something, those need to be fully there, like the 4 or 5 endorsements that we had in the past. And would also allow middle level. It seems like Rob was part of that maybe group that was saying, hey, look, I want to do this. So is there a pathway for me to do this other thing, and took advantage of that? I think that is an absolute necessary thing so that teachers can, again, have professional choice.
Yeah, I was crazy enough to want to teach middle school my whole career. So I wanted to, think about potential financial implications, not just like statewide, but thinking about like districts. Because right now with ESSER funding just wrapping up at the end of September, and thinking about just, not that anybody would use that for jobs, but some might have. But but thinking about the money for districts, what are some of the potential financial implications for one versus the other? Like, is one more favorable for a district that may be struggling financially versus one that's not? And Gabriel, I'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, I think fiscally we really need some wisdom in the leadership of our states to really understand. So part of the move for us to go to a pre-K 8 licensure is the fact that there are entire sections of the state of Ohio that have had for a while now a extreme teacher shortage in the middle and high school levels. So one of the ideas was, well, we have a lot of elementary teachers. Why not just make them eligible to teach upper grades? Okay, well, I get it, right? I see the issue, but there are things that are causing the issue, and those are the things that we need to tackle. Actually, not putting teachers in a position where a principal or superintendent can say, "Look, I know your passion's K2. I know your passion's K2. I get that, but guess what? I got to have you in grade 6 because I have 6 people willing to do K2." And 0 people willing to do grade 6. Somebody's got to move. You're the newest. I'm moving you. That's the way it's got to be, right? You're certified up to grade 8. I'm moving you to grade 6, or I'm moving you to grade 8. And I'm telling you I need you to teach this particular content because you're certified to do it. I'm telling you I need you to do that. That's the job. And so, there are tremendous consequences and they will be financial, because there will be more teacher attrition when people are not allowed to pursue their passion, right? There are people who have taught kindergarten for 30 years and they loved every day of it and they were amazing at it. There are people who need to move up, like Jody, like Rob, or need to kind of scale around, right? And so that both of those needs need to be met, I think. You know, as to the financial viability, that's a funding issue, right? And if we continue to shed teachers because we make practices that continue to deprofessionalize teaching, we are going to be in a world of hurt like we haven't ever seen. And if even the O'Malley research, if it's even half right, Ohio has been declining in the number of people coming into the profession, right? Which means there's a decline in the number of people being graduated, but the people retiring is not declining. And so if you exacerbate that with a policy where teachers lose their professional choice, right, about you know, where they're most passionate and can go, they will burn out faster, and we will lose them on that end as well as we're going to lose them on the pre-service end. I had a pre-service teacher in my office yesterday, very sad. He wants to be a high school teacher. So he says, look, I cannot get past the calculus. And I'm like, I hear you. There are harder math classes that are coming. Like if you want to be a high school teacher, these are the kinds of things that, you know, are on the OAE exam that you have to pass, right, in order for us to certify you. And he's literally crying. I got the tissue box, right, where we're having this conversation. And I said, well, what about if you went to a K-8 degree? He's like, oh no, there's no way. I cannot. I'm not that guy. I can't, you know, I'm not interested in teaching kindergarten. So what would you like to do? I don't know. Maybe I'll go business or something, right? So then I say, well, have you ever thought about doing middle level 4-9? Because BJSU currently still has that because, it's going to roll off like it's not law anymore. But until we have, have to completely shut it down, we will keep offering it. He goes, that's a possibility. And I have 2 or 3 secondary people every single year that will tell you the same thing. If middle level is an option, I might think about that instead of just leaving education altogether. But when you confront them with the other option besides teaching math in high school is all subject areas from pre-K to grade 8, that's not something they're interested in. On top of that, we had preview day this weekend. During preview day, students kept coming in, and I would ask them the 2 options that are going to be available soon, only 2 options. Are you interested in pre-K to grade 8, or are you interested in like high school? And they said, oh no, I'm right in the middle. I don't like the little ones, and I don't want to deal with the high school kids. And I'm like, and they kept saying it, like they kept coming in, and like I'm wondering where are my high school teachers at? But they just kept saying and like gravitating over to the middle level table. You could say.
Gabriel, I'm curious because you've referenced research around the desire, I guess, or the goals of pre-service teachers.
Yeah.
Has there ever been any research on like 10 years into their career? How are they feeling about that?
Not that I know of.
Okay, because I have talked anecdotally with people who have that 4-9, and they're like, well, I really wish I would have, like, they're not always happy with the subject area they picked. And that's very anecdotally, it's a small sample, so I don't want to make any claims about that. But I was just curious because I was thinking how much, like, I don't want to teach kindergarten anymore. And I haven't for quite some time. They're cute and they're fun for about a half hour, but I was grateful when COVID hit. Our district was adopting all-day kindergarten, and so I was an instructional coach at the time, and I was so grateful for my K-8 licensure because if I hadn't had that, I would have been teaching all-day K during COVID. So because I had my K-8 license, I was able to go teach middle school math. So I know there are situations where perhaps it wasn't beneficial for a teacher, but in that specific situation, that was very beneficial for me.
I want to jump in. I just have one last question for you, and then we'll start wrapping up here. I've heard Gabriel several times now mention the professionalism of teaching. And Jody, I want to start with you. So you gave a great story about your own journey and like how you grew as a math teacher with that, moving through the K-8 in different grades and different times. So can you talk more about the professional growth and like how you see that developing for a teacher in their career and where they can go for that growth or how they go about it?
Great question. I think ultimately a great teacher at heart is a continuous learner themselves. Um, you just sort of have that innate curiosity to keep learning. Um, and I think about my husband and my son, who are both computer programmers, and like when they come out of school, they have a skill set, but they also continue to grow their skills. Like I think teaching as a profession is the same way. We don't come out fully baked, right? We have some skills. Um, a first year teacher, I wouldn't expect them to know everything. I would hope that when they come out of college, they know where they can go for support. So, what are those um, tried and true resources that they can go to? Joining professional organizations like the Ohio Council of Teachers of Mathematics, finding their support people. I would love to see a more robust support from the state level in continuing to support early career teachers, because there is so much that's crammed into a 4-year undergrad degree. I think it's unreasonable to expect people to come out with all of the knowledge Gabriel has mentioned in just 4 years.
I have a follow-up question for you with that. So like, because I'm getting a sense from when you talk like you want a narrower grade band because you're saying like in the university we can't like cover it all. But I'll tell you like in 20 years of teaching high school, I what I do as a teacher now was not what I learned in university, right? It's like it was something I gained, like Jody's talking about, over the years. So like how are we deprofessionalizing it if we make it so wide? Like, don't we want to promote the lifelong learning that Jody talked about and things like that? Like, the university doesn't have to teach it all, does it?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the line that we need to wrestle with here. Because I'm obviously not saying they need to know everything or that it's even possible to know everything about teaching with a 4-year degree. That's not what certification is. That I mean, think about any profession, right? Um, you have a bar exam. I'm setting a bar, right? You do not know all the law, right? But you know this much, and it's good to get started. You don't know all the medicine, but you know this much. Now you can practice that, right? Um, and the idea of not having any teachers be specialized means you expect all teachers to know it all. And that's just not fair. I think the the likelihood of someone coming out of any 4-year institution that has tried to I mean, at best they're going to give you maybe 2 courses in mathematics because that's all they had time to do with a PK8 licensure. And they're standard setting right now. The standard setting meetings are going on at in this state right now. And you know, in the 1-8 licensure that Jody has, Dr. Deb Gallagher and Dr. Angela Thomas also have that 1-8 licensure, and their stories are different from Jody's. They think that it is possible to prepare students good enough to get started in the profession with a middle level licensure that focuses on 2 content areas, 4-9. And if we want to be generalists, then we need a smaller band at the bottom to be generalists in, right?
Like you're saying, like universities can't teach it all, and even what you're saying now with the law school version, like don't all lawyers, no matter what they're going to go into, take the same exam? So like, why can't all teachers have the same base certification, and then we build on it over time, right, as professionals and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Well, I would say because research doesn't bear out that that's what's best for students, right? Let's just take, Hill et al. 2005, just as an example. I have 800 studies we could talk about, but let's talk about this one. Um, in that study, they showed that elementary teachers that had a higher specialized content knowledge had statistically significant higher student achievement rates. Specialized content knowledge matters. And remember, specialized content knowledge is that bringing together of how I get students to come to know the mathematics. It's not just math knowledge. You can't just give elementary teachers math classes. That's not a good idea for how to get them to truly understand the profession of math teaching at the elementary level. They need specialized content knowledge courses. And some of our programs in this state do that and some don't. I think the state needs to look at that. That's another thing I would advocate for. But in the Hill study, it's just one of many, though, right? That makes this link. And in fact, the reason why we created a 4.9 licensure band, right, and the original K3 licensure band was exactly to allow that level of specificity in knowing how to get children to do that. To water that down is the piece that I'm saying is going to deprofessionalize us. And then I would just add one more statement there. Let's say that we say, okay, they're all going to be generalists, PK8. We know that you can't fit everything in the college, and you know that you're going to graduate them, and you know they're going to be woefully unprepared in a great many ways, right? Whose kids get those teachers? Well, my grandkids are going to be born in the state. This topic matters to me. Like, this is very personal. I need the teachers of my grandkids to afford them the best possible connections in all subject areas that they can. And if I can't prepare the teachers to do that with the time I have, then I've woefully underserved the teacher themselves. And that's going to create more stress, more anxiety, and more likelihood that they burn out of the profession. And I don't want that for our teachers. I want them to feel confident in what they're asked to do. And if what we're asking to do is all contents from grade pre-K to 8, this just doesn't seem reasonable.
Okay, and I think I will pause there for our questioning round. We will now end by giving each side a minute or two to make their final arguments to you.
And starting first, we're going to begin with Gabriel. Gabriel, your time starts now.
Okay. So a grade band that's large, like PK through grade 8, creates a situation where PK8 certified graduates will have insufficient knowledge of all content areas, specialized content knowledge, and student cognitive, social, and emotional development across a vast set of years in which children are just rapidly changing. The PK8 certification will exacerbate the teacher shortage. That's shown by O'Mellen's research. It'll be especially detrimental to mathematics and science teacher preparation, and also devastating for students and families. So we should return to the previous PK5 grade band, reinstate the 4.9 grade dual concentration, and the 712 single concentration grade bands, or at least have conversations about what makes sense for our students and for our teachers when we're talking about the preparation of teachers and them entering the workforce. PK8 is just too large of a licensure band and will fail students, teachers, families, communities, and ultimately fail our state.
And with the final word, we have Jody. Jody, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, I appreciate all of the points that Gabriel raised today. I think that we're actually in agreement on a lot of things. I think what you said, Gabriel, about conversations is really important. So as we're moving forward in our state, at least, I think it would be really important to bring multiple perspectives to the table, and get the perspective of, like I said, some of those teachers who have been in the field now for 10 years. What worked well for them? Is there anything that they would recommend? I think the opportunity, at least, to have some flexibility in the path that you choose as a teacher, and at least, like you mentioned earlier, provide alternate pathways if you do want to make a change, would be really essential. So, how can we structure licensure to allow people to continue to grow through their professional lives? So, thank you for the conversation tonight.
Yes, thank you all. That concludes this debate, and you've given us some great insights.
And now it's up to our listeners to take a moment, ponder the arguments, and share with friends and consider what's resonated with you. Be sure to go to our Twitter at DebateMathPod to share your thoughts on this debate. Where do you stand?
And huge thanks to both of our guests, Gabriel and Jody. You were awesome. You were thoughtful and respectful. I know you are friends, but you have very opposite opinions on this fact. So it was great to see adults respectfully having an argument. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thanks to those who are listening, and we hope you enjoyed and learned from this debate.
And as we wrap up, Gabriel, where could listeners find you?
Listeners can find me at my email address, gmatney@bjsu.edu.
And Jody, where can listeners find you?
Listeners can find me on LinkedIn. There's search for Jody Bailey.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Thank you.